The business plan really sets the roster for next year. It sets the vision and it's the invitation. But what it ultimately is the representation of everybody's hopes, their dreams. What do they want out of the company next year? And it's a great formal process to get through a lot of alignment.
Welcome to another episode of Aleph Ventures TV. Today I have back with me Mr. Chet Funk, who is CEO of Aleph. Excited to have Chet back. I'll introduce our topic in a second that we'll be chatting on, but good to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, man. Always great to see you.
What was the highlight from the winter break? We just came off let's see, we're January 15th as we're recording this, so we're into the new year, but how was the break?
Lots of awesome family time. We got a buzz down to Florida. We got a partner down there, so I had lots of hospitality from them down there on Sarasota beaches, and that was fun. And then looking forward to tomorrow, we're taking off for Cabo for the Paris painting kind of awards trip. So, yeah, man, it's been great.
Awesome, man. A lot of jealous listeners potentially. So you better come through on some value here for them.
Okay.
So the topic. It's the beginning of the year, like I said, mid-January here. I know a lot of folks that are listening to this, they are probably putting the final touches on their business plan for 2025, or they came into the year, their overachievers came into the year with that set, and we're 2 weeks into getting after that puppy. Business planning is something that we do a lot of. We have 18 partners. We do extensive business planning for all of those businesses. And so this is just a topic I wanted to bring of how to think about business planning and being smart about business planning.
Great topic.
And so maybe just to start, and I hope that a lot of folks that are listening to this, they're already into this. So they're not operating without a business plan. Although I know from just the numbers of people I talk to, there's probably some still listening that our kind of hopes and dreams are what they're planning on in 2025. I hope that's not you if you're listening to this, but maybe just speak to sell people on doubling down on this prioritization of this practice of business planning, being good at it, refining it. What benefits is there for prioritizing this practice of business planning?
Well, good question. Obviously, mid-January, if it's not done by now, it's certainly time to start. But for us, we typically are doing this at the beginning of Q4. We're starting the first drafts of this. And then right about now, we've got through all of our roles, goals, and comp meetings, our annual reviews from last year. And the shareholders are actually signing formal management agreements and all of these business plans. But I would say, sitting in my seat, anybody who's either a managing member or kind of that visionary or president of an organization, the business plan really sets the roster for next year. It sets the vision and it's the invitation of what's going to be exciting to be around here next year for your team. And I would say that tool of a business plan, it could be as simple as a spreadsheet, right? But what it ultimately is the representation of everybody's hopes, their dreams. What do they want out of the company next year? And it's a great formal process to get through a lot of alignment, a lot of buy-in to what are we going to do not only next year, but over the next 3 years, what's meaningful for you. So I would say, yes, it's a great financial activity. It helps you set budgets, of course, but probably the biggest value piece for me is it helps cast vision and bring that into reality for your team.
That's a great point, man. I think something I hear when I talk to owners sometimes, depending on the size of their business, is, how can I appeal to talented people when I'm, at 1.5 million in revenue, 2 million, 2.5 million in revenue? Yeah. How could I make my company more appealing? To the degree that you are clear on your business plan and you have something very concrete to invite somebody into, I think that absolutely is a recruiting tool. If any,
it's a big one for sure. And especially for any of you out there that are more of the visionary side, yeah, you can take an idea and you can get bought in for sure and run. That's not most of humanity. And it can be frustrating if you're in a little bit more of that CEO or visionary seat of something to, why do I have to always spell this out? But man, that exercise, most of the team needs it really spelled out. And it's a great force fit, stress testing all of your assumptions of how much of this is data based, how much of this is feeling based. And I really like the term bets, right? We go on EOS. So a lot of our quarterly plans and annual plans follow a lot of the traction or EOS model. There's another organization out there called System and Soul, and I think they use a very similar framework of it, but they use that term bets of what bets are we all making together, the time, energy, and the resource that we're going to put into the 2025 plan. What are we betting is going to pay off? And just sometimes simple language changes can get people a little bit more bought into it. I'm not just a corporate cog here. We're all making a bet on my time, my energy, and how is that going to yield a result, not only for what I want, even if I'm not an owner in this business, but for all the shareholders and for my family, right? What am I betting on my career here growing into? So yeah, that's pretty high level, but definitely do it, right?
Yeah.
Short
Yeah.
end. It doesn't matter how you do it, if it's on paper or if it's using one of those formal tools. Practice makes perfect in some degree,
Totally.
and those lots of great stories of kind of all the heroes of the business world. Of the more you document these things, the more you go relive. Where did I think I was going to win, and why did we not? On those are great lessons.
Totally, man. Yeah, I've not met a business owner who has had sustained success that does not have an intentionality, a practice and skill around business planning.
Yeah,
You know, so over time, everybody can have a good year.
yeah,
But to do that consistently takes this. So speaking of bets, that's a good maybe segue into this first thing I wanted to ask you about. Growth is the biggest bet. That's the most
yeah,
common bet. Growth in all different forms, right?
yeah,
And I think a common question is, how much should I grow this year? I think most people want to grow,
yeah,
and I think some folks who are, it's like, oh, I want to grow as much as I can. It's like, well, that's very
mm-hmm.
vague. That doesn't really, it's hard. That's not a clear vision, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so maybe just what are some, I don't know, how do you think about that? What are some good questions to ask to, like, what is a good amount of growth? How should I think about that?
Yeah, it's man, it is pretty relative. What do people think when they say a good amount of growth? If you are a $500,000 painting company, a 100% growth is probably an appropriate target, right? I hope it's more than 100% that you can grow in a year. I would say once you're into that eight-figure market, it's pretty challenging to start setting targets of, hey, I'm counting on growing 50% every year. Well, it can be done. I would start by saying it's typically who, not how. And a lot of this comes down to our business planning. Maybe I'll just walk through a little bit of it. It starts in the sales and marketing division for sure. And who's on the roster? How long have they been here? And what are their individual sales plans? And a lot of them have personal financial goals that it's tied in. We pay everybody based on the margin that they bring into the business over the course of the year. So they have their own individual business planning session, and our marketing team has their own individual independent analysis of how strong is our brand right now, how expensive would it be to buy more estimates or buy more market share. So that combination of those two should always inform the beginning of a smart plan. It shouldn't necessarily come from, I would say, it shouldn't come from a visionary or an integrator just saying, "Hey, I want to grow another $5 million, and you guys figure it out." I would recommend it should start as a bottom up. What we would always do is we kind of have three versions of the plan. We've got a smart plan, we've got an inspirational plan, and we've got a contingency plan every year that we go into this. And the smart plan is typically somewhere between 80 to 90 plus 80 to 90% of the sales team hitting all of their goals. And depending if they're a new salesperson, what we're counting on versus a seasoned one, and it's informed for sure by how much market share can we get from our marketing team? Now, I'm using words like people and teams. Not everybody has that, right? So some of this just digs down into your own analysis of if I'm the sales guy and I want to bring on a new salesperson, it would start by saying, hey, I sold whatever, $1 million last year. I probably shouldn't expect the new sales guy to match my sales when I'm bringing them up. Maybe they hit 80% of their goal, and that would be where we would start as a smart plan. Now, every single month, you're tracking all those leading KPIs of, in order to hit this plan, it's not just an annual target. We break it down to every single week. What would that mean in order to get to your annual sales goal? If we are finding out, hey, this new guy's a rock star, or the average job size is up 15% year over year, or man, holy cow. For example, for us, we're in a very seasonal market. If we spend more money in these 3 months out of the year, it's about half of the cost of buying estimates the other 3 months that we're spending money. Let's triple down on the budget on these. Those will be calculated bets that you want to make on these with leading indicators of how is it going, right? And we've been on both sides. We've had really fun years that once you get into Q2, we've had the sales and marketing team. Well, I would just tell you this last year for Paris Painting, just in the residential exterior paint division of it, they blew past the budget by over $3 million of revenue because the market was responding to this Q2 push that we're putting in. And that's a great, right? They hit the inspirational plan this year. We certainly have had other years where it's like, hey, Q2, we were a little optimistic. That wasn't a fully smart plan. And we got to listen to the data of, I can't expect to outbuck the trend of what we've done year over year. So for us, like a key metric for us is 52% of our sales need to be in by July 2nd. That would be our 8-year historical metric. And we got it down really to the week of where we need to be on sales. And we don't let ourselves, if we're coming in at 45% of the goal, nobody is expecting that Q3 and Q4 are going to be a big recovery. You have to look yourself in the mirror early on if you're concerned about profit, right?
Sure.
That would be the only other factor here. Sometimes there is, some businesses where it's like, no matter what, I got to get to this revenue mark because of a lot of reasons of it needs to be able to support that overhead. And I'm willing to punt on some profit this year in order to get there. At least your eyes wide open when you're looking at that. But
I want to go back to something you said of on the growth thing of it's more a question of who, not how. I think that's really important. What that makes me think of, I know I've been a part of a couple conversations where like Nate has brought this up on the marketing side, where sometimes if you're misaligned on your capacity, how you can get yourself into trouble of, if you plan on and you go and execute on bringing in more leads than you can actually service with the people that you have on your sales team, it's like, that's a bummer. You're wasting money at that point, so there's an element of that additional lead growth was not good because it wasn't aligned with the team that you could reasonably have. And I think too, thinking through, how many people can I reasonably hire, train, develop? Am I having a child this year? Okay, well, if I'm having a child in May, I'm probably not going to be able to train somebody. Yeah.
Where is everybody's vacations? Where are holidays following this year? Yeah, I would say from our experience, so there's 11 sales guys in just a home base here. It is kind of the Rubik's Cube of the bottoms up. Every single one of them is going to create their 2025 business plan on their sales target. How many estimates are they asking the business to buy for them? How many are they going to generate through their own account development that they have? And then how many can they do kind of each week throughout the course of 52 weeks, right? Where are the holidays? Where are my vacations? We are typically, all of us are having kids all the time, it seems like, right? So where am I out for a few weeks here? And that bottoms up and boils up to a gross plan. Let's just say, that plan says that these guys on the extra paint, they want to go sell $15 million or whatever it is. We're definitely not planning the overhead for 15 million. I'm not committing to that day one, right? I might commit to 90% of a business plan for that. And we're not signing up for all of that day one. And I would just say, giving yourself margin, like life happens. Nothing ever happens how you think it's going to go. Sometimes it works better. Sometimes it works worse. It never goes the way that you planned it, right? So building in the margin, and I would say at least a 10% margin. So if everybody here is bought into a $15 million plan, as an owner, as a shareholder, I am going to release that overhead probably in Q2 spend once it's proven that we're on that trajectory. But as a shareholders, in that example, and maybe the numbers are somewhat irrelevant, right? But in that example, we're probably planning for a $13.5 million budget on that painting division. And you're watching that data month over month, and that 13.5, I also have a contingency for what if it's 11, right? And what are the cuts that we'd have to make, and where would we start pulling back? No later than May. Otherwise, it's just too late. You've already spent it.
How about let's stick on that, just optimistic plans. I mean, you're touching on it of I think like different elements that help protect against that, but maybe from just like analyzing your P&L. I mean, too, it's like fundamentally, I think there are coaching outfits and different tools out there that'll give you planning tools.
Yeah.
I think that more people should make that like a more of a one-to-one correlation with their P&L. I think sometimes people they'll plan their sales growth, or they'll plan their gross profit. They'll plan, KPIs, but it's somewhat disconnected from their kind of full P&L picture.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, maybe just looking at a P&L, is there anything like, things to consider, things to look at, things to analyze to just protect against you being overly optimistic in a business plan?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things that we've done is there's not a lot of fixed overhead in our business model. And what I mean by that is we see a lot of businesses. So a lot of people will pay their project managers or their coordinators or their sales guys kind of a flat rate, or even for a sales one, they might pay them a commission, but it might be on revenue, or maybe it is tied into margin, but it's not tied into the marketing performance of this as well. So maybe I'll just unpack this one. This is probably, and this is hard to implement. I'm just going to disclaimer. It does take a lot of transparency that you would have to bring into your business, open planning for everybody to kind of see the margin of the business, see the real expenses. But the way that we set up every sales contract, every salesperson across the nation is we pay them on a cost on margin metric of the margin that they bring in. We give them ballpark 35% plus or minus. Every business is a little bit different based on how healthy their companies are. And what that means is every marketing dollar is tracked that is used into their business plan. Every overhead expense is tracked in their business plan. And they're effectively running their own mini P&L that is stitching into a bunch of mini P&Ls that is a true reflection of the business P&L. And the reason why that works really, really well is nobody's surprised on the sales marketing cost, right? So they're responsible for managing their sales marketing costs on this, which is typically, I would just say, 9 out of 10 times. That's where the wheels fall off on these business plans. Is I outspent on that. I didn't manage that correctly, or the sales, the stuff that they sold was at low margin. It was misbid, and it's just hard to stitch all that back without opening up the books. We're a very, very transparent and open book organization. There's nothing to hide on it. Everybody knows kind of every dollar that's coming in to this organization. And then what that is hedging you against is somebody's off plan. You're not the only one feeling the weight and the pain of that. If they're overspending on their marketing bids because their success ratio is low, or if the margin is coming in too low, usually that is self-correcting, And what I mean by that is that person is highly motivated to either increase their skill, or if they're not the right fit for the organization, what's nice is it's not like, hey, I don't like you, you're not doing your job. It's like, dude, um, your comp plan, you probably don't like your comp plan right now because it's not going to work out. And I want to help you. I want you to win. But if it's not for you, then it's got to kind of self correct itself as soon as possible. And yeah, I'm
The
not sure
good, the
you
good,
know enough about them, but
yeah. I mean, and again, I think this is a topic that we're kind of trying to be evangelists for this in the industry. I think there's a lot of ills in business plans and performance of businesses by this getting squirrely. And it can be a little bit, yeah, there's a little learning curve to it, but I like to kind of think of it as the same way where it's like, how profitable are we producing jobs?
yeah,
It's like, how profitably are we selling? Like, are we getting leads and selling those jobs?
yeah,
Right. If you have
yeah,
phenomenal, that's what cost on margin tracks. If you have
yes,
amazing profitability on a job, but you spent, 10 grand for the lead and you're paying your sales guy $1 million, it doesn't matter how profitable you produce it at.
yeah.
Um,
And here's
it's
right, and what you're talking about, just to spell it out again. Let's just say two guys both sold $1 million, and they both brought in $450,000 in margin. They're selling at a 45% margin. The reality is, right, if I try to limit a third, like, they can make about $150,000 on their sales and marketing cost. Now, one guy, he might have accounts that cost nothing to the business, and he has like we spent no money on marketing to get that $1 million, right? And that should be like, God bless America. You should get paid a lot of money for that, because the business didn't have to pay the marketing. Now, the other guy, he might sell at a 30% success ratio. He's burning through whatever, $150 to $200 bids, like they don't even matter. And you could spend we see businesses spending over 10% on marketing on some of their sales guys. So now all of a sudden I've got over $100,000 in marketing with you, and I've had to do a bunch of field coaching. You need a lot of support, and so I got to pay somebody else to go out and coach you to do this. I'm 120 grand, let's say, into this. There's only $30,000 left, right? This guy should probably make 150 grand. The reality of the sales, the cost of that sales, there's probably only $30,000 left for the salesperson to receive in there. So that's where people can miss. It's a big blind spot on a lot of these business plans, and that's profit. That's where people's their profit shrinks dramatically because, yeah, the challenging part is when you really start auditing this, and we look at a lot of businesses, it's not uncommon to see people giving up 50, 60+% of their margin to their sales and marketing division. And that is super unsustainable, obviously.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, I mean, the reality is the ability to close at a high success ratio that is like profitable work at a high success ratio
Yeah.
that is what being a good salesperson in a painting company is. You have to be able to close effectively and profitably. If you have somebody that's doing that, what's good about this way of, I think, setting up comp is it also can, I think, do a good job of shining light on, we really do have a marketing issue. Like, we really do need to get more leads. We really do need to increase our volume, because, you can see when you start tracking these things, you can see,
Yeah.
gosh, every bid I give this guy, he's closing 60% of them, and
Yep.
they're all very profitable. You're also then way more confident whenever you go spend another 30 grand, 50 grand, whatever it is on marketing, because statistically you have a great salesperson. You can feel good about that investment. If you're murky on all this,
Yep.
it's just like, should I
But here's
spend more?
also, in this business plan, in this model, it's not that you as a business owner are just going to spend that $30,000 to $40,000 on marketing. That salesperson is committed to spending that money, right? They're committed to servicing those leads and taking that bet with you. in this model.
Yeah, I love
You
it.
have to have that local buy-in of that's kind of the new who not how. Of course, yeah. How you would do it is just buy the more leads and scale and grow, right? But everybody in this industry, from a sales perspective, is there's unique and there's nuance of how they're going to get there.
Yeah. Um, on that on that topic of maybe investing more, going and getting more, as I look at the past success of Paris painting in particular, I do think we've gone through COVID, the kind of the COVID year. We went through this year, which you made mention of. Um, hey, we got to our stretch goal. It's I think there's something that people don't maybe think enough about is like, how do I evaluate throughout the year so that I can pivot and capitalize on unforeseen opportunity? I think COVID is a good example of this, and talking to enough companies too. It's not just Paris. Like, I think the companies that, like, none of us knew what was going to happen. None of us knew that, just how the year was going to go. We kind of decided to keep our head down and then, keep moving. And it's like, oh, there's actually phenomenal opportunity. And we were able to pick our head up, capitalize on that. That was awesome. I think this year, on some of the marketing activity and stuff that Micah did around sales for Paris, saw a trend, jumped on it. What can you say about just whether it's practices or tactics, or like, how can a business be self-aware throughout the year to make sure it's capitalizing on unforeseen opportunity?
Good question. I would say nothing beats historical data of where we're at in this market. If you don't have that, in the absence of, we have really, really sound data on our operations for the last better part of a decade, right? It's not a long data set, but if you look back the last 2 to 3 years, what percent did we need to sell per month? And then usually you could follow kind of the production trends lag behind that, obviously. But if you don't have that, then I would say your vendors do, one way or the other. So go and talk to whether it's Sherwin-Williams. From a national perspective, doesn't really matter where you are. They would have great data on the sales and the production trends in every single market, as well as how big the market is in each of these. And that helps us. We're kind of getting to that stage right now of how much market share do we want to have in each one of these segments of exterior paint, of interior painting revenue. And we got a long ways to go before we need to throttle it for sure. But it is helpful to be aware of how much of the market you have. And almost for everybody listening, including myself on this, the answer is like not enough to be concerned. I would just start by saying that. That's usually the answer for almost everybody is you got a long ways to go before you should really be concerned about that. But it can help understand each market. And I would just say we live in Minnesota, right? So, man, if you do not hit April and May and you don't hit those, and I'll just ballpark numbers, right? I need to sell 15 to 18% of my revenue each one of those months, let's say, over the course of the year. And it is super hard to buck that trend up. You can always drop the ball and fumble and not sell out the rest of the year. But if I'm going for $10 million, let's just say, to make it simple, and I didn't sell 1.5 million in April and I didn't sell 1.8 million in May, I'm not getting 10 million, right? And that's like that. Those historical data marks, they just don't lie. And I would just say some people don't have enough real data or true data on that, but the more you can live and die on those, it gives a lot of confidence too to the sales team of that was this year of holy cow, you guys, you blew past that by almost $1 million on those 2 months. Let's keep going, right? This well is a lot deeper than we thought this year, and let's trust the data, and let's keep pushing it to the marketing and the sales of this. And those are always the fun moments, right? Most times people are a little bit more optimistic than reality is. And I would just say that is an art as much as it is a skill. of mostly it comes down to who your team is. Do I know them well enough to know how they're going to perform this year? Is really that's less skill. That's more like how intimate are you involved with your team and the people that are working for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good sales pitch on data. I think when we think about having clear data, we can think about the accountability side of that. It's like risk mitigation is
Yeah,
kind of how we think about the importance of data, which is true. That's not to say it's not true, but if you don't have clear data, you're going to have a higher likelihood of not capitalizing on good trends, too.
yeah, yeah,
So if you can't analyze, if you don't have a good data set to analyze,
yeah.
you could go through months, quarters, years where it's like you could have actually grown more if you would have pivoted and read the data. Um,
And now
that's
what we're talking about is a lot. This is direct to consumer residential is a lot of what we're referencing, right? And we have
yeah,
businesses as
good
well that
point.
are much deeper into commercial, but the same thing applies to your lead indicators. There is how many estimates do I have, and everybody's a little bit different on commercial and industrial painting, but I know that historically 9 months from now, if I've got this funnel, this is what I can count on, right? And that's a different lead metric that you're definitely tracking. It's a little bit more faith on it, but on the flip side, there also is a little less overhead and expense in order to. It's a little less risky in some senses to build that funnel out as well.
Yeah,
A little more B2B stuff, right?
sure. Um, and maybe this like not a fun topic, and
Yeah.
maybe something that's I think it can just be helpful. Like there's no like good solution or easy
Yeah.
solution or whatnot. But if you need to like have a significant recut to a plan,
Hmm.
um, just how do you? Yeah, I think you've spoken to this a little bit, but maybe just to underline it, when should you be looking at your plan and it's like, oh, I know I should recut it. It's maybe too late to make it up, and then I don't know, best practices or considerations with like for the team communication when you are recutting.
Yeah. Good question. A couple thoughts that just come to mind on this is I would say for us at this stage, it's um, recuts happen between the shareholders and the management team. And it is a negotiation process. It's like facing the facts on this. Before we even enter the year, we're always defining here's the win. Like we have to cross this threshold for profitability this year. And everything above that creates a lot of opportunity for bonuses and profit pools and whatnot. But this is what the shareholders are expecting. Like we can't go below that. And you might be a one-man band, and you should still define your win, like what you're going to tell yourself in May. And I would say that leads into what you're saying. May is kind of like there's no more room to hope in May that this is going to pan out. And May's got a time to face the music and just believe the facts. And I would say what that typically means for us, you got the May data, and we are either staying the course or we are doubling down and we're going for the bigger plan or inspirational. So we're either staying the smart plan, we're going for inspirational, or we are going to a contingency. And those contingencies usually means some form of a cut or a restructure or budget renegotiation in June. And you really, I think for us, why that rhythm has been really good is it lets you start to look at an 18-month business plan. Not all is lost, right? But what can we do for the next 18 months so that, let's just say this were happening this year, so that end of 2026, we're not, and why I say this is it is important to not lose sight of, we've talked about this in the past, of the goose versus the golden egg. You can make some deep cuts. You could fire, for example, fire a couple sales guys and you could just step in and start selling yourself. That would be like a common solution for a lot of these realities. But yeah, you might have made a little bit more money in 2025 if that were the case. but the goose is not healthy. The business still doesn't have salespeople. It's just you now. And now you got to resolve that again in 2026. So I think that's probably the most important thing to start looking at. All right, how am I going to repivot this? How am I going to recast vision for this sales guy for the next 18 months? Because this year he or she may not be trending exactly the way we wanted to do, but let's set up a development plan. What is this going to mean for your comp plan, your commission structures? And sometimes that's just like self-selecting out. That person says, it's just not for me. I'm not cut out for this. And that's like, all right, sold. Answers there. And that means we're back to some recruiting, and we're going to kind of reevaluate what does this all mean to find the win with the shareholders. And that might just be you, right? Talking to yourself, like putting your shareholder hat on, put your manager hat on, and literally look in the mirror and talk to yourself about it, right? But for most of you, most everybody listening to this, you probably have some level of a management team that you're doing this with.
Yeah, and I think it's having that longer picture of the goose that you're trying to create. It's not all just maximizing the profits that I get right now. What's this bigger vision that we're going to? I think that's important because I think sometimes whenever performance is lacking, the temptation can be, or I guess I should just say the leader always has to look in the mirror first. I think good leaders of, okay, if the salesperson's not panning out, just really being honest of like, well, did I coach them enough? Right. Was I out in the field enough with them? Because you could recut in a way that really hurts the goose too. And you let go of a great candidate that really just needed another quarter of coaching.
Yeah.
And, that they just weren't getting. And if you have that longer term perspective, hopefully that also kind of opens it just makes you maybe a little bit more self-reflective, and not as kind of white knuckle, because those good people can be hard to find, for sure.
And I would just walk the next step. Like as a business owner, you got to look that in the mirror. Everything is your fault, right? And just accept it. This is working out exactly how we planned for it to work out. Even if the result isn't what I want, is because I didn't plan correctly. Though, right? That everything performs how it is organized. And I think the beautiful thing about, yes, individual salespeople have those comp plans, but I just mentioned that earlier of, who's responsible for the leading and training of that salesperson. And they should also have a comp plan that is based on the performance and the P&L of this business. And I think that's been a really, really meaningful thing for us over the years, is that visionary, that integrator, who's leading sales, who's leading operations, who's leading finance. They're all tied into a management contract. And we'll just use some rough cut numbers. Let's just say the goal was $5 million this year, let's say, on your business plan. And last year we made 15% profit, $750,000 would be kind of a profit target. And maybe that's where you guys are starting this year, is saying the first $750,000 is going to the shareholders. Everything else we'll split 50-50 above that. We do that's a simplistic version of what we actually do, but it's the general kind of concept of it. You're creating a threshold. And it really comes down to every year, like, if this team's not performing, it's because the managers weren't developing them. And they built a plan that wasn't set up for success. And they might not have got out and done the field coaching that they should have done for that salesperson. And that is going to impact your compensation, your time and energy, your leadership, and your talent was not performing here. That will definitely be a big haircut on the bonus pool that you're going to receive.
I love it, man. Good stuff. I think it's a good place to pull up for this conversation. Appreciate your time. Man.
Always,
looking forward to seeing how 2025 goes.
Aren't we all?
All right, man.
All right. Good to see you, man.